Sir, step away from the car. Whose vehicle is this?
It's mine. I'm just trying to go home.
People like you don't usually drive something like this. Let me see some ID.
I just wrapped up a long day at work. I'm not giving you my license. There's no reason to.
Refusing? That's obstruction. I could put you in cuffs right now.
What you're going to do is read this. That's my judicial ID.
Rookie Officer Dylan Mercer had only been with the Philadelphia Police Department for 7 months when he made the biggest mistake of his career. It happened one quiet evening around 7:30 p.m. in a peaceful residential parking lot. There were no emergency calls, no radio alerts, nothing urgent. Mercer simply spotted a black man walking toward his car and decided he didn't look like someone who should own a vehicle that nice. The man, nothing unusual, nothing threatening. The scene was calm, completely ordinary, but Mercer approached anyway and demanded to see the man's ID. The man replied calmly that he was heading home after a long night shift and refused to show identification, explaining there was no legal reason to. That's when Mercer's tone shifted, from routine to aggressive in a matter of seconds. Moments later, he would realize that the person he was confronting wasn't just any citizen. He was a superior court judge for the state of Pennsylvania. Before we move on, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. Stories like this deserve to be heard, and your support helps bring more truth to light. Philadelphia, early evening, March 12th. The parking lot outside the Parkside residential complex was still and quiet. Most residents were home. Only a few cars sat scattered across the asphalt. The setting sun stretched long shadows across the pavement. Officer Dylan Mercer, just 23 years old, had been on the job for 7 months. 7 months of trying to prove he belonged, to show he was more than just another rookie. To him, being assertive meant being capable. To be suspicious meant being vigilant. His training officer had noted early on. Officer Mercer shows enthusiasm but struggles with threat assessment and de-escalation. He often interprets normal civilian behavior as suspicious. Recommend further supervision. But despite the warning, Mercer was cleared for solo patrol. The department was short-staffed, training times were cut, and red flags were quietly filed away. In his short time on the force, Mercer had already faced 3 citizen complaints, each one involving unjustified stops, all involving people of color. None had led to formal punishment, just a verbal warning. The pattern had been forming for months, but no one had noticed. That evening, Officer Dylan Mercer was cruising through the Parkside neighborhood on a routine patrol. No active calls, no emergencies, just another slow drive through quiet streets, looking for anything that might stand out. At 7:34 p.m., Mercer turned into the parking lot of a mid-rise apartment complex. That's when he noticed a black man walking calmly across the lot toward a silver Mercedes-Benz, clean, modern, clearly expensive. The man wore a black hoodie, blue jeans, and sneakers. His pace was relaxed, keys in hand, clearly heading to his car. To anyone else, it would have looked ordinary. A resident leaving for the night, someone who lived there. But in Mercer's mind, it triggered something else. A quiet, unspoken bias he'd never confronted. A black man in a hoodie walking up to a luxury car didn't fit the picture he carried in his head. He didn't think it consciously. He didn't say it aloud, but the thought was there, silent, guiding him. Without hesitation, Mercer pulled his patrol car into the lot and stopped near the Mercedes. He stepped out, shoulders squared, and began walking toward the man with purpose. Judge Donovan Price had been awake for nearly 20 hours. At 44, he was a superior court judge for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Respected, fair, and known for his sharp legal mind. He'd spent 6 years on the bench, presiding over criminal, civil, and appellate cases. Before that, 12 years as a civil rights attorney, a man who built his career defending justice and equality. His colleagues admired him. His rulings were rarely overturned. His name carried weight in every courtroom he entered. But that evening had been exhausting. He'd spent the entire day working on a complex case, carefully reviewing precedents and refining his written opinion. By the time he finished, it was past 7 p.m. He showered in his chambers, changed into casual clothes, and finally headed to the parking lot, ready to go home. All he wanted was a quiet drive, 15 minutes of peace before sleep. No small talk, no confrontation, and certainly no encounter with law enforcement. But that was exactly what was about to happen. "Excuse me," Officer Mercer called out, his tone sharp and commanding. "I need to talk to you." Judge Price stopped, key still in hand. He turned and saw the uniform. The young officer walking toward him, one hand resting near his duty belt. His first reaction wasn't fear, just a wave of tired frustration. "Not now. Not tonight." "Good evening, officer," Price said, keeping his voice calm but weary. "Is there a problem?" "Can I see some ID?" Mercer asked. Price frowned. "ID for what?" "I need to verify who you are," Mercer replied. "I'm a resident here," Price said evenly. "I'm walking to my car." "What's the issue?" Mercer's eyes flicked from the Mercedes to the man standing beside it. "That your car?" he asked. "Yes. Can you prove it?" Judge Donovan Price felt his jaw tighten. Years as a civil rights attorney had taught him exactly where this was heading, and years as a judge had made him keenly aware of when a situation crossed the line into unlawful detention. "Officer, I don't need to prove anything," Price said evenly. "I'm on private property. I haven't broken any laws. You have no legal reason to ask for my ID." Mercer stepped closer, his tone firm but impatient. "I'm asking nicely. Show me your ID." Price didn't flinch. "And I'm declining politely, because you have no reasonable suspicion and no probable cause." Mercer's eyes narrowed. "Are you refusing to cooperate with a police officer?" "I'm exercising my constitutional rights," Price replied. That's not the same thing, and there it was, the turning point. The moment when everything could have de-escalated. A more experienced officer might have realized he was confronting a man who simply wanted to go home, and walked away. But Dylan Mercer didn't walk away. Narrator tone. "If it were you, do you think this officer was looking for a valid reason, or just a justification after the fact?" Let us know what you think in the comments. And if this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe. Stories like these matter, and your support helps us bring truth to light. Mercer's hand moved toward his radio. "I'm calling this in. Suspicious person refusing to identify." Judge Price stayed calm, though his patience was wearing thin. "Call whoever you want," he said. "But when your supervisor arrives, I'll be sure to explain that you stopped me without cause. Demanded ID without legal justification and are now escalating because I know my rights." Mercer's face flushed red. "You think you're smart?" "No," Price replied coolly. "I think I'm informed." "There's a difference," Mercer muttered under his breath. "People like you." Price's eyes narrowed. "People like me?" Finish that sentence. Mercer froze, realizing he'd almost said something he couldn't take back. He cleared his throat. "People who don't cooperate make things harder for themselves." "I'm not making anything harder, officer." "You are," Price said steadily. "You stopped me for no reason, and now you're trying to justify it after the fact." Mercer's hand drifted to his taser. He didn't draw it and just rested his hand on the grip. A silent show of force. "Last chance," he warned. "Show me your ID or I'm detaining you." Price's response was firm. "For what crime?" "Failure to identify." "That's not a crime in Pennsylvania, not without reasonable suspicion, in which you don't have." "I have suspicion," Mercer shot back. "Based on what?" Price challenged. "Tell me exactly what made you think I've committed, am committing, or am about to commit a crime." "Be specific." Mercer hesitated, stammering, searching for words that didn't exist. "Because there was no reason, no evidence, no suspicion, only bias. Only assumption. Only the belief that a black man didn't belong beside an expensive car." "I don't have to explain myself to you," Mercer said finally. Price met his eyes. "Actually, under Terry vs. Ohio, you do. If you're going to detain me, you need reasonable, articulable suspicion, and you don't have it." Mercer frowned. "Are you a lawyer or something?" Price gave a faint smile. Something like that. He'd been through this before, not as a target, but as a defender. He'd represented clients stopped and questioned for no reason other than the color of their skin. He knew the script. He knew the tactics. He knew the language officers used to justify stops that couldn't be justified. He also knew that pushing back, speaking up, insisting on his rights could make a bad stop worse. It could turn a tense encounter into something violent. But he also knew that simply complying wouldn't protect him. Handing over his ID wouldn't erase the humiliation. Quietly submitting to an unlawful stop would only teach officers that they could do this without consequences. So he made a choice. Slowly and deliberately, Judge Price reached into his jacket pocket. Mercer's grip on his taser tightened. "What are you doing?" Mercer barked. "Getting my identification," Price said calmly. "Since you've made it clear you won't let me leave without it, keep your hands where I can see them." No sudden movements. Price pulled out a black leather wallet and opened it carefully. Inside were his driver's license, credit cards, and something else. A heavy gold badge. He removed it and held it up so Mercer could read it clearly. Superior Court of Pennsylvania. Judge Donovan Price, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The badge flashed in the evening light, an unmistakable symbol of authority. Mercer's eyes went wide. His hand slid away from the taser. He looked at Price, speechless. Price's voice was low, controlled, and cutting. "I'm Judge Donovan Price, Superior Court of Pennsylvania. I've been working all night in my chambers. This car is registered to me. I live here and you stopped me because you assumed a black man couldn't afford this vehicle." Mercer's face turned pale. "Judge, I didn't," he stammered. "You didn't know because you didn't ask. You didn't verify. You did nothing except make an assumption based on race and class," Price said. "And you did it on camera." Mercer's eyes flicked to his body camera fixed on his chest. The red recording light had been on the whole time. Every word, every threat, every moment was documented. "Judge, I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" Mercer started. "You meant exactly what you did," Price cut in. "You saw a black man and labeled him suspicious. You demanded ID with no cause. You threatened detention without justification. You put your hand on your taser when I asserted my rights." "Please, what's your badge number?" Price asked. Mercer fumbled with his uniform, reading the number aloud in a shaky voice. Price typed it into his phone. "And your supervisor's name?" Price asked next. "Sergeant Holloway," Mercer replied. "I'll be speaking with him, with Internal Affairs and with your department's legal counsel." Mercer looked sick. "Judge, can we just forget this happened?" he pleaded. Price's expression hardened. "No, we can't. This happens every day to people who don't have my credentials, my authority, or the legal know-how to fight back. They have to accept it. I won't accept it, and I'll make sure there are consequences." A second patrol car pulled into the lot. An older officer stepped out, Sergeant Holloway responding to Mercer's radio call. He saw the scene and immediately sensed the tension. "What's going on here?" Holloway demanded. Price held up his judicial badge. "Your officer stopped me without cause, demanded ID without reasonable suspicion, and threatened detention when I asserted my rights. I'm Judge Donovan Price, Superior Court, and this encounter is on his body camera." Holloway's face shifted from confusion to horror in seconds. "Judge Price?" he said, recognizing him. Then he turned to Mercer, furious but controlled. "Get in your car now. Don't say another word. Go back to the station and wait for me." Mercer nodded and walked to his patrol car, moving like someone who'd been unmoored. Holloway stepped toward Judge Price. "Judge, I apologize. This should not have happened." "No, it shouldn't have," Judge Price replied firmly, "but it did, and it's going to be addressed." Sergeant Holloway nodded. "I understand. We'll launch an investigation immediately." Price shook his head. "I'm not relying on your internal investigation. I'll be filing a formal complaint, and I'm considering legal action." Holloway said nothing. He knew there was no fixing this moment. Price got into his car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving the sergeant standing in silence. The weight of what had just happened settled in. A rookie officer had not only destroyed his own career, but had also exposed the department to massive legal and political fallout. Narrator tone. What would you have done if a rookie officer spoke to you that way, even when you were the one with authority? Let us know in the comments. And if this is your first time here, hit subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be told, and your support helps us bring the truth to light. By noon the next day, Judge Donovan Price had already filed his complaint. He didn't wait for the department to react or twist the story. He went straight to Internal Affairs, submitted a formal written statement, and requested a copy of Officer Mercer's body camera footage. Within hours, the Pennsylvania Judicial Defense Union was involved. Within a day, the State Attorney General's office had been notified. Within a week, civil rights groups across the state were calling for a full investigation and public accountability. This wasn't just another bad stop. This was a sitting Superior Court judge, an officer of the judiciary, unlawfully detained by a rookie cop purely because of racial profiling. The optics were disastrous. The legal exposure was enormous. The political pressure was immediate. Internal Affairs launched an investigation without delay. Mercer's body cam footage was reviewed by supervisors, attorneys, and the department's civil rights compliance officer. What they saw was devastating. Mercer approaching without cause, Price calmly asserting his rights. Mercer escalating, Price identifying himself as a judge. Mercer's visible panic. The timeline was clear. The violation was undeniable. The defense was non-existent. When investigators reviewed Mercer's personnel file, they found the pattern that had been ignored for months. 3 prior complaints, all involving unjustified stops, all involving people of color, all dismissed with minimal follow-up. Training reports showed warnings about poor judgment and aggression. Recommendations for additional supervision had been ignored. Yet Mercer was cleared for solo patrol, because the department was short-staffed and desperate for boots on the ground. The system had failed, and now it was about to pay the price. At City Hall, the city attorney's office immediately recognized the crisis. This wasn't a complaint they could quietly settle or make disappear. This wasn't a civilian they could intimidate. This was a judge, someone with legal expertise, institutional credibility, and undeniable evidence. The city attorney called an emergency meeting with the police commissioner, the mayor's legal counsel, and the head of internal affairs. "We have a problem," the attorney said flatly. "A big one. Judge Price has grounds for a federal civil rights lawsuit, and if this goes to trial, we lose. Badly." The commissioner tried to defend his department. The officer was just responding to what? The attorney cut in. There was no call, no complaint, no suspicious activity. He saw a black man near an expensive car and made an assumption. That's textbook racial profiling. The commissioner hesitated. Maybe we can argue he was being proactive. Proactive policing doesn't mean stopping people for existing, the attorney shot back. The Fourth Amendment still applies, and Judge Price knows that better than anyone in this room. Silence filled the room. How bad is the exposure? The mayor's counsel finally asked. Worst case, 8 figures, the attorney said grimly. Best case, high 7 figures plus mandatory reforms and federal oversight. The room went still. Meanwhile, civil rights organizations were mobilizing. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund issued a statement demanding accountability and systemic change. The ACLU requested Mercer's training and complaint records. Community leaders held press conferences. Legal analysts appeared on news channels across the country, dissecting the case and predicting sweeping legal fallout. The Philadelphia Police Department tried to contain the damage. They issued official statements about an ongoing investigation, promising a commitment to constitutional policing and zero tolerance for misconduct, but the public wasn't convinced because the body camera footage had already been released through a public records request. and the footage told the truth. A truth no press release could bury. A rookie cop had racially profiled a superior court judge, demanded ID without cause, threatened detention without justification, and only backed down when he realized the man he was targeting had the authority to end his career. 3 weeks after the incident, Officer Dylan Mercer was placed on unpaid administrative leave. His internal affairs interview only made things worse. I thought he looked suspicious. Based on what? Just the way he was dressed, the car. It didn't match. Didn't match what, Officer Mercer? Silence. Are you saying you stopped Judge Price because you didn't think a black man in a hoodie should be driving a Mercedes? I wasn't thinking about race. Then what were you thinking about? More silence. The deposition was a disaster. Mercer couldn't explain his actions, couldn't articulate reasonable suspicion, couldn't defend the stop because there was no defense. Soon after, the Pennsylvania State Police Training Commission launched its own review, not just of Mercer, but of the entire Philadelphia Police Department's training and certification process. What they found was systemic failure, shortened training periods due to staff shortages, inadequate psychological screening, minimal bias training, supervisors signing off on rookies despite documented concerns. The commission issued a formal report, citing multiple violations of state training standards and demanding immediate reform. The department had no choice but to comply. Narrator tone. Should police departments be allowed to send rookies into the field without mandatory psychological and bias screening? Let us know your thoughts. And if you're watching for the first time, hit subscribe. Because stories like this need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. 6 months later, Judge Donovan Price filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. The complaint named Officer Dylan Mercer, Sergeant Holloway, and the City of Philadelphia as defendants. The claims were devastatingly precise. Fourth Amendment violation. Unlawful seizure without reasonable suspicion. 14th Amendment violation. Racial discrimination and denial of equal protection. Violation of Pennsylvania Civil Rights Act municipal liability. Inadequate training, supervision, and failure to address known misconduct. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. The evidence was overwhelming. Body cam footage capturing every word and action. Personnel. Files showing prior complaints and ignored red. Flags internal affairs reports proving the department's failure to correct behavior. Expert testimony on racial profiling and constitutional law, but the most powerful evidence of all was Judge Price himself in a sitting Superior Court judge with flawless credibility and expert knowledge of the Constitution. His record was spotless. His authority, unshakable. No jury in the country would side with a rookie cop who racially profiled a respected judge in a parking lot. The depositions were brutal. Mercer's attorney argued he had acted in good faith, that it was a misunderstanding, not intentional bias. But the body cam footage destroyed every argument. Officer Mercer, you said Judge Price looked suspicious. What exactly about his appearance or behavior suggested criminal activity? I don't know. It was just a feeling. And that single line, so it was just a feeling, became the sentence that ended his career. A feeling, the attorney repeated. A feeling based on what observable facts? Silence. Was it the hoodie? Partly. Is wearing a hoodie suspicious? It can be. Is it illegal? No. Was it because he was black? No, I wasn't thinking about race. Then why did you assume he didn't own the car he was walking toward? No answer. The deposition dragged on for hours. Every question peeled back another layer of bias. Every answer exposed the lack of justification. Everyone in that room, Mercer, his attorney, the city's legal team, knew the truth. The case was indefensible. Settlement negotiations began soon after. The city's first offer was $3 million. Judge Donovan Price rejected it immediately. This isn't about money, he told his legal team. This is about accountability. About making sure this never happens again. You can't racially profile someone and walk away with a slap on the wrist. The city returned with $5 million. Price refused again. $10 million, his attorney said at the next meeting, plus mandatory reforms, independent oversight, and public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Non-negotiable. The city's attorneys balked. But they knew the truth. If this went to trial, the jury might award even more. And the reforms were coming either way. The State Training Commission was already demanding changes. Federal oversight loomed on the horizon. They could settle now and control the stories or fight and lose everything. They settled $10 million paid to Judge Donovan Price. But the money wasn't the real victory. The terms were a public acknowledgement that Officer Mercer's stop was unlawful and racially motivated, mandatory, bias training for every Philadelphia police officer, extended psychological screening for all new hires, independent review of all traffic stops and detentions for racial bias, creation of a civilian oversight board with subpoena power, requirement that all rookies complete at least 18 months of supervised field training before solo patrol. Annual public reporting of stop data, complaints, and disciplinary actions. The reforms were sweeping. The settlement was historic, and the message was unmistakable. Racial profiling has consequences. 8 months after the incident, Officer Dylan Mercer was formally terminated. The letter was clear and final. Officer Mercer engaged in racial profiling, unlawful detention, and conduct that violated department policy, state law, and federal constitutional protections. His actions exposed the city to severe legal and financial liability and damaged public trust in law enforcement. His employment is terminated immediately, and his certification is revoked. Mercer appealed through the police union. The appeal was denied. His name was added to the National Decertification Index, ensuring he would never work in law enforcement again. Not in Pennsylvania. Not anywhere in the United States. At 24 years old, his policing career was over, destroyed by a single decision made in a quiet parking lot one March evening. Judge Donovan Price returned to the bench weeks later. When he entered the courtroom for the first time after the settlement, something extraordinary happened. Everyone stood. Attorneys, clerks, bailiffs, and even opposing counsel, they were applauded. It was unprecedented. Judges don't get standing ovations. But this wasn't just about a case. It was about dignity, justice, and the courage to use privilege and power to protect those who don't have either. Price raised his hand for silence and spoke briefly. Thank you, but I didn't do this for applause. I did it because it needed to be done. What happened to me happens every day to people who don't have my credentials, my authority, or my resources, and they just have to accept it. That's not justice. That's not equality. And until we fix the systems that allow it, we haven't done our job. The room was silent. Then Judge Price sat down, lifted his gavel, and went back to work. So what do you think? Do civil lawsuit payouts really change police behavior? Or will departments keep ignoring bias until the consequences become impossible to afford? Let us know your thoughts below. And if this is your first time here,
hit subscribe, because stories like these must be told.
And your support helps us bring more truth to light. Let's be clear about what happened. No crime occurred. No threat existed. No emergency justified intervention. A black man walked to his car, and that's it. That was the entire factual basis for Officer Mercer's stop. Everything that followed, the demand for ID, the threats, the hand on the taser, was built on assumption, on bias, on the belief that a black man in a hoodie couldn't possibly belong near an expensive vehicle. This wasn't about public safety. This was about perception, about who is seen as belonging and who isn't. Judge Donovan Price didn't just win his own case. The $10 million settlement sent a message that echoed far beyond one parking lot. Accountability isn't optional. Justice isn't selective. And equality must be enforced, not just promised.